Hi, my name is Sue McCleaf Nespeca. I'm from Kidlit Plus Consulting, and I'm going to talk about some of the new great books that have come out for spring of 2019. All these books, the ordering information for all these books should be underneath the video, so you can get all the ordering information, grade levels, ISBNs, and everything you need to be able to order these books. On the list, I actually have more books than what I'm talking about. I can't highlight all of them. However, every book that is on that list, if you print it off, is a book that has received at least 4 positive reviews from the various reviewing journals we have. So they're all top quality, high quality books, I guess you would say. Okay, we're going to start out with this, because this is going to make quite a impact. This is Laurie Halse Anderson, who did Speak a number of years ago. Actually, that came out in 1999. This is kind of a follow-up. It already has an incredible marketing campaign. Speak had won awards, and this is going to be very, very popular. That first book won the Prince Honor, and it actually won a National Book Award finalist. Okay, and this is a memoir in verse that covers her difficult early childhood, her own rape at the age of 13, and her slow recovery through her high school days. She recounts the stories she also recounts stories that since she wrote Speak, that people have written her. Just an incredible number of people have written and shared their own experiences, and so she shares some of that in this book. It's just very powerful read, and I would think it'd be a book that everybody would want in their teen collection. Well, let's go to the other end of the spectrum for babies. B is for Baby is a cute little book that actually takes place in an African village. All the words begin with the letter B. It's a story of a baby girl, her brother, a bicycle, and some bananas. There's only a couple words per page. I think you could probably share it in a story time. It's actually kind of a large book, for babies, but it's nice to look at, and it has, it's good for diversity. Okay, I just think this is fun. I'm just going to show you this. I know in story times, we do books about, very hungry caterpillar or whatever. I think it's nice sometimes to include something that has maybe a little bit of a nonfiction aspect to it. And that's sort of what this is. Caterpillar and Butterfly, a fold out and find out. It literally talks about how the eggs hatch, we get these caterpillars, and it goes through the whole process. How the caterpillar grows, sheds a layer of skin, it grows some more, spins a thread. We have the chrysalis, and after weeks of changing, spread your wings to dry, and we finally have. And I think if you're sharing it, kids would really love seeing you share that type of book in a story time. I have to hold it just a little bit, I guess you would say backwards. Like if you hold it completely straight, that's what's going to happen. So if you just kind of lean it, I think they can still see it, but if you just lean it a little bit, it folds, I think, fine. How long will it last in circulation? I don't know. You tell me. I don't know. Maybe, sometimes maybe you keep one book non-circulating so that you can share it in a story time and you don't have to worry about it falling apart. Because I know that sometimes those things will not last as long. Okay, this is probably one of the most impactful graphic novels out so far this year. It had like 7 starred reviews. Very well done. It's all about middle school and being the new kid in town. He's 7th grader Jordan. He's a new kid. He's at an upper crust private school, but he's also black. So there's issues of race in here. At this private school, there's a lot of assumptions made about what black families are like, what their financial status is, how some well-intentioned teachers stumble over language, and even just the discussion of different skin tones, how blacks have different skin tones and what that means and how they feel about that. Jordan has a sketchbook, and there are funny parts in it too, some funny asides, but it's a very well-done graphic novel, and one reviewer, Kirkus Reviews, says, oh no, this was Booklist, I'm sorry, an engrossing engrossing, humorous, vitally important graphic novel that should be required reading in every middle school. So I think that tells you something. This is a story about someone who I hope you've heard of. Her name was Pura Belpré, and I can't roll my R's good, so I know I'm not saying it quite like you should. But there is an award called the Pura Belpré Award that's given every single year. And I really honestly didn't know a whole lot about her life. She was a librarian and a storyteller. She came from Puerto Rico. She was the first Puerto Rican librarian in New York City. She arrived to attend the sister's wedding. They found out that she was bilingual. Actually, she was actually trilingual, but they, hired her at this library because of that. And she ended up transforming library services in New York City. She started diverse story, and this is back, so it's kind of not that like today. It wouldn't seem so surprising. This is back when diverse storytelling wasn't happening really. She also started outreach, which libraries weren't doing outreach back then. And the cover of the book is supposed to represent her desire to be like Johnny Appleseed. She wanted to plant story seeds throughout the land. This book is another book that was published simultaneously. There's an English version and there's also a Spanish version. Again, part of our history that I prefer not to think about, but we're forced to think about it sometimes. This book was actually, there was a book first written for adults. The adult version of this book, I should say, was actually a National Book Award finalist. So this is the, if you look closely, the Young Readers Edition. Again, just, I don't know. I guess I didn't realize some of the stuff that happened in the history of our country. So this is a story of, and again, it's all true. This is a story of Ona Judge. She was one of George and Martha Washington's slaves. She was actually mixed race. She was a daughter of a white indentured servant and a black enslaved woman. She grew up in Mount Vernon. She became Martha Washington's personal maid. So when George Washington was elected president, Martha had to pick which of her slaves would go with her. But the criteria at that time was very clear. They needed someone who was going to be very obedient, discreet, and preferably of mixed race. So she was picked. However, there was a problem when the seat of government was moved to Philadelphia, because now the Washingtons were living in Pennsylvania, and there was a law that mandated freedom for any enslaved person who resided in the state of Pennsylvania for more than 6 months. Again, I didn't even know that, but that's true. So what did the Washingtons do? They simply rotated them. Before the I know it's awful. Before the 6 months were up, they would just rotate these slaves so that they would never get their freedom. Another thing that's just, I just can't even imagine what this is like. In 1796, Martha Washington had a granddaughter who was getting married. Okay, what do you get for a gift for a granddaughter? She gave her Ona, the slave. Think about that. The slave was the gift. Slaves were nothing more than a piece of property that represented a certain amount of money to them. Which is why when the slaves escaped, they would go after them, because that's money. They're not people, they're money. So she gave her as a wedding present. But Ona actually was able to escape. She went to New Hampshire, and for years, George and Martha Washington had people try to bring her back. She escaped every time. Despite poverty and hardship, she escaped the person who was the most powerful man in America at that time. Just incredible book to read. Again, this is the Young Readers Edition. Okay, on a much lighter note, we have Cyril and Pat. Cyril's a squirrel. And he just bonds wonderfully. He has no one. Look, he looks so lonely. He has nobody. He's sad. Then he meets Pat, another squirrel just like me. Now, everyone tries to tell him he's not a squirrel, but he doesn't pay attention. They have the best adventures. Can't you see your friend Pat is not like you? Your friend's a real joker, he said. So they're going on, they're having the most wonderful time of life, until finally someone gets through to him. The boy says, "Oh, Mom, I see a big rat." And Cyril, "A rat? He's a rat? He's not a squirrel? Can't you see squirrels can't be friends with rats?" Cyril doesn't know what to do now. He's kind of dejected, but doesn't know what to do. Then the dog goes after him one day, chases him everywhere, and here's the dog still trying to chase him. Here he is in the dark, all alone, scared. What's he going to do? Here comes the dog. Guess what? Someone rescues him. It's a whole family of rats. Lake Park still has only one squirrel, but he's not alone. Now Cyril lives there with a large gray rat, his brave and clever best friend, Pat. I think that has some interesting themes that you could talk about. Real friendship has nothing to do with appearances. Okay, I just like April Henry, so that's why I'm talking about her book. When I pick up her books, I can't put them down. I mean, they're thriller, mystery type books, and they're guaranteed page-turner books. You know, you can't put them down. So this is, again, another New York Times best-selling author. This takes place in Oregon. It's 2 days after a house party. And Adele is at her childhood friend's, Tori's house for this big party. And when she is 2 days after that party, she's going to a nearby park and she stumbles across a body, and is actually Tori's body. Now, for years, Adele has been diagnosed as she has schizophrenia, though she thinks that the truth is a little bit more complicated than that. She can see the dead, not hallucinations, but for real. And so she's going to try to solve this murder of her best friend. I don't know whether I should tell you this one part or not. I guess I will. There's a part where her memory gets hazy and she's worried, did she commit the murder? Okay, there's a page-turning book. Okay, this is just all about crocodiles. And it's done in a picture book format, but it's factual. So if kids need some informational book on crocodiles, it also talks about the difference between alligators and crocodiles. It's by Martin Jenkins, not Steve Jenkins, but Martin, but he does, a lot of nice, easy nonfiction books. Okay, there was a book by Jory John, called The Bad Seed, which is very popular in libraries. I'm sure some people use it in story time. Now we have The Good Egg. It's kind of the antithesis of The Bad Seed. And here's the good egg. He's a good egg. He rescues cats. He does everything right. You name it, he does it right. But he lives in this carton with 11 other eggs that are, well, they're just not quite as nice. There were a dozen of us living together under one recycled roof. There was Meg and Peg and Greg and Clegg and Shell and Shelley and Sheldon and Shelby and Egbert and Frank and the other Frank. The other 11 eggs weren't on their best behavior. They weren't exactly good. They ate sugary cereal, threw tantrums, cried for no reason, et cetera, et cetera. So finally, being a very good egg, he started noticing he couldn't handle it anymore. He started noticing cracks in his shell. This is very funny, by the way. I don't have time to read it, but it's very funny. So he tries to cover them up with Band-Aids there. He goes to the doctor, and he realizes that he has too much pressure on him. So he leaves the carton and goes off, and just has a very relaxing life now. And you see his cracks are starting to heal. Yes, that's pretty good. And eventually, he feels like himself again. He becomes back to himself again. His head no longer felt scrambled. So he decides, he makes a big decision. I'm going to return to my old carton and my friends. I'm kind of lonely out here. But he says, I'm going to try to learn. My lesson is I'm going to try not to worry so much. So as soon as he gets back, they greet him by doing everything bad they could possibly do. Everybody missed me. I missed them too. Hello, Meg, Peg, Greg, Clegg, Shell, Shelley, Sheldon, Shelby, Egbert, Frank, and the other Frank. Sure, every once in a while, someone's still a little bit bad, but it's not like before. Here's what I realized. The other eggs aren't perfect, and I don't have to be either. And I'm okay with that. Yep, the old carton is back together. We're a solid dozen again. It's good to be home. So it's kind of a story about, actually it's kind of a story I need, that you don't have to be such a perfectionist person. So I could learn something from that. Maybe some kids could too. This book was actually supposed to be published back in 2017, and the publishers held it because they were afraid of the reaction it was going to have. This is before immigration became an extremely hot topic in American politics. The goal of this book was to talk about kids who are living in the shadows, but because of the repeal of DACA and the fact that they had all the kids' pictures in the book, they decided it was not a good thing to publish it, and they were going to just ditch it. But the kids who were interviewed really wanted the story to get out there. So they took out their pictures, and they took out their names, and they redacted it for safety, and now it is published. Voices of Undocumented Young Adults. And some interesting things, immigration problems, whatever. Actually, in the 90s, as this book points out with statistics, our borders were even much more open then than what they are now. So we're actually we don't have as many immigrants now as we did back then. It gives all this information about that. It talks about DACA's uncertainty. It talks about how these kids identify with America and they feel like they're American. So it's an interesting look at that whole subject. Okay, if you want a twisted little red hen, here's the little green hen. 3 of the other animals are very helpful, the other 3 aren't. And the 3 that aren't, peacock, fox, and cat, are in problem. They have a problem when a storm rolls in and the waters start to rise. So are the others going to help them or not? So it's kind of a twisted little red hen. This 9 months is just what you think it is. It's a book about the parents of a small child telling her she's going to be a big sister. Now, some parents are going to want this book, and some parents are going to be offended by this book, okay? Because it even shows the fetus growing, etc. But there are parents who want that type of information. They want to present it to their children. So it goes month by month, has drawings, talks about what it's like to prepare for a new child, and there's some more information in the back about babies. This, I actually have on the list, if you download it, there are 2 books by this author I have on the list. Both are very well done. This, I'm just going to highlight just one. This is this author's personal struggle with her eating disorders and how she recovered. She had anorexia nervosa, and she has divided into 4 parts about eating disorders, tools and information for recovery, society and the media, and as you recover. So, it's for anyone who might be struggling with that disorder, this would be a good book to recommend. Another book about slavery. This is done by the illustrations, written and illustrated by James Ranson, who's just a wonderful illustrator. Talks about this enslaved family. And the bell rang. There's actually a bell that rings every day. I'll read you, this is a quote from the book now. The bell rings, no sun in the sky. Daddy gathers wood, Mama cooks, we eat. They go back just every day, the same thing. Go out, work in the fields, except for daughter. She's too young to work in the fields yet. And one day her brother gives her this doll, handmade, kisses her and says goodbye. And sure enough, he and 2 other boys escape. The slave owner, as we talked earlier, their property, so he has to go out and find them, does find the 2 boys, and they're whipped terribly. But he doesn't come back. So the family never knows if he actually made it or didn't make it. There are some swallows seen flying away in the end papers of the book, which makes you feel like maybe he was able to get away. And then the little girl starts struggling with the fact, should I be doing this also? Gary Schmidt won a Newbery Honor, and it was a National Book Award finalist. You might remember his book, Wednesday Wars. This is a story about young Carter Jones. Young Carter Jones kind of has a lot going on in his life. He has, his father was deployed. He has these young sisters that kind of drive him nuts, I guess you'd say. He's dealing with the fact that his brother died suddenly, and his father was very uncommunicative to him about it. And then he starts realizing that he doesn't think his father's ever going to come back home. So he's dealing with a lot of stuff. So one day the doorbell rings. This is kind of like the Mary Poppins book for boys, for older boys. Because the doorbell rings, and in comes this Mr. Bowles Fitzpatrick. He was, the grandparents sent him. And he's going to come in and kind of overtake the household. One of the and help this boy come back to life, sort of. One of the interesting things about this book is, because he's British, Mr. Bowles Fitzpatrick, he teaches them cricket, and there's a lot of cricket terminology, and you could kind of find out how to play cricket just by reading this book. But it's a middle grade novel, I think, that will appeal to kids who are kind of just a little bit in the outskirts of things. This is just fun for story time. Who has wiggle waggle toes? This is one of those books you share at story time. You get them up and wiggle their toes and wiggle their butts and wiggle whatever. And it's nice because the kids, they have different skin tones. One kid has eyeglasses, one's on a wheelchair. It's just a nice change of pace for story time. This is another one. Oh, I forgot to hold that one up. I'll just show you a little bit what it looks like inside, just so you get an idea of how much. Can you twiddle your wiggle waggle toes? Yes, I can twiddle my wiggle waggle toes. Okay, another one that you could use in a story time program is this Hush Little Bunny. And yes, it is. It can be sung. Hush, little bunny, don't you cry. Papa's going to give you the big blue sky. If that big blue sky clouds over, Papa's going to give you a patch of clover. I think this would be good for maybe like a toddler story time. It's very simple. I guess you could use a preschool, but I think maybe a little bit more toddler. But it's a cute little book that can be sung in story time. And here's another picture book I want to show you. This is Janet Stevens. I would tell you, if you asked me, this is really hard. I'm sure you all would have difficulty with this. If someone said, what are your favorite 5 picture books ever? I have to tell you that one of mine is Tops and Bottoms. Do you remember that book? I just love that. Okay, this is the sequel. Bear, same bee tie, hair, same carrot shirt they had in the first book. Maybe not as great of a story as the first, but still a good story. There he is. He's still lazy. I guess he didn't completely learn his lesson. And Fox says, hey, I want you to turn this place back into a mighty fine farm again with fine crops. And he gives him what he says is a donkey egg. Supposedly it's a donkey egg. So Bear's doing everything. He sits on it to keep it warm. By the way, there's little factual things in here, which you can't really share if you're sharing a story time. I don't know if I like that idea or not, but it's there. Okay, so anyhow, Hare finally convinces him that this is not a donkey. Look, he's taking care of it. He's cuddling it and rocking it and doing everything he's all excited about. And then one day it gets away from him and it rolls down a hill, and comes and cracks. It's actually, oh, sure enough, it is a watermelon. And he's like kind of heartbroken because he was expecting a donkey. So he said, he tricked me. There's no donkey, ain't no baby donkey. So Hare convinces him. They plant the seeds and they get all these watermelons. Look at that, watermelons everywhere, to market to sell the watermelons. What are they going to buy when they get there? It's a donkey! So he gets his donkey after all. Just not quite the way he planned. Another book that has just an incredible number of starred reviews. You might remember the teen book that came out, The Hate U Give. It made quite a splash. This came out in 2017. This is the second novel by that same person. It's on the come up, which talks about this girl, Bree, who is actually a daughter of a deceased underground rapper, and she's trying to start her own rap career. She wants to make it out in the hood and reach rap stardom, but she also loves her family and friends. And she ends up in this rap battle with a song that she herself has written. Her mother loses her job. She has to kind of take care of the family because they're poverty-stricken. But it shows many facets of black life, black experience, highs and lows of being a poor black family in America today. And again, the first book was on the New York Times bestseller list forever in a million years, so I'm sure this one's going to be very popular. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I had the next one. The Bridge Home is another one. It got 6-star reviews. This takes place in India. 11-year-old Vihi and her 12-year-old sister actually run away because their father's very violent. He's striking them all the time, and they end up living on the streets, and they befriend 2 other kids who are homeless boys who had lost their family in a tsunami. So together, these kids are trying to make a life, and it's the story of them bonding and trying to make a life. They're picking through garbage dumps for glass, metal scraps. They sleep on abandoned bridges, and they end up forming their own family. They become very tight-knit. The novel touches on issues of social justice, such as caste, child labor, poverty, and just is very beautifully written. This also got a lot of good reviews. Genesis Begins Again is a story of a 13-year-old black girl who has a very heavy hand in life. This is kind of interesting here. We'll talk about this shading. She's had to move several times because her family keeps getting evicted, because her father's an alcoholic, he gambles, he keeps defaulting on the rent. She hates all these circumstances, but what she hates most is her black skin. And again, she's dark-skinned like her father, who she doesn't even, care for because he's an alcoholic and a gambler. When he gets drunk, he's very mean. She wants nothing more than to look like her light-skinned mother, which is an issue with many black people. And kids call her names. They call her charcoal, eggplant, blackie, whatever. She desperately wants to be accepted, and so she goes through physical pain to try to change the look of her skin and her hair to fit in. Along the way in this book are mentions of black activists, athletes, artists, musicians, because she's also, I forgot to tell you, she's a very good singer. So it's kind of her coming to grips with all this. It's very well written. And the last book I'm going to mention for the spring books is this one by Eugene Yelchin. He won a Newbery Honor book for breaking Stalin's nose, and this is called Spy Runner. Yelchin is actually from Russia himself. And this is actually during, if you can remember back to this time, when I know I lived through it. It was during the Cold War we had with Russia. And 12-year-old Jake, of course, Russia was the enemy. We all felt Russians were evil, etc. So Jake is called to action because his father is actually missing in action from the U.S. Air Force. They can't find him. And his mother, because they don't have much money, starts renting out the father's attic office. And she rents it out to a Russian border, which really drives the boy absolutely nuts. He feels like his mother's betraying him, the father, etc. And he now wants to stop at nothing to try to uncover this stranger's secrets and what's happening. This book actually even draws parallels to the current political and social climate today, and talks about prejudices, and even talks about media misinformation. All right, so those are some of the books. There are more on the list that you can look at. Again, they all have very positive reviews, so those that are on the list, but those are a few that I wanted to highlight today. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you will visit again when we do a book look in the fall.